Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the podcast Paradise. I'm Max Paradise without an E, and today I thought I'd take an opportunity to discuss the upcoming NBA season, seeing as it starts in a couple days. I just thought this would be a good opportunity to sort of discuss, preview the league, and kind of pin down my thoughts on just kind of how I think the league is going to shake out this season. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just kind of start with the East, and I'll make a video about the West as well. With the East, just kind of go through what I think the standings are going to be from 15 up on to 1. By the way, Paradise today, we're on lovely Long Island, New York. It's about 7 at night, crisp, chill October air. It's actually quite nice. I didn't really appreciate fall throughout my life because I kind of always get sick in it, and I just never really liked it that much. But I've definitely, for whatever reason, this month I've come to kind of appreciate October and just kind of the whole atmosphere, the temperature, the crispness of the air, and the whole kind of Halloween atmosphere. I just, for whatever reason, this year I've really started to enjoy it. Anyways, without further ado, let's get to what I'm sure you guys all want to hear me talk about, which is the bottom seed in the Eastern Conference. I'm just going to kind of skim through the non-playoff teams in the East really quick because, let's be honest, none of these teams are even really that interesting, to be honest with you. There are some teams that are a little interesting, but these teams are all either bad or just kind of blech. So let's start from the bottom. 15, I think it's going to be Atlanta. Just because, they have almost no talent. They weren't good last year, and I don't think Trae Young is really that much of a difference maker in his rookie year. Not many rookies are. The vast majority of rookies are negatives to their team. And I don't think Trae Young is going to be an exception. And we don't even know if he's going to be good at all. So I don't really see. And they traded their best player last year, Dennis Schroeder, to Oklahoma City. So I don't see really many alternative picks for the worst team, not just in the East, but in the entire NBA this year. So, yeah, Atlanta, not very good. 14, I've got Orlando. The reason I have them this low is because, they have talent, right? Like, they have Aaron Gordon. They have some other interesting young players, like Jonathan Isaac looks to be a really promising player at some point in his career. Evan Fournier's decent. But just the vibe from Orlando is a team that doesn't know what they want to do yet. They have so many unanswerable questions. Like, are you trying to play Jonathan Isaac and Aaron Gordon together when they're both, I think, pretty clearly 4s or maybe even 5s in the modern NBA? That doesn't seem like it's going to work. But yet you want to get them both minutes and try to develop them. And how good is Nikola Vucevic? He puts up points and rebounds, but in the modern league, when you have a 5 who just can't defend at all, I don't really think there's too much use for that on a great team. So I don't really see Orlando making really that much noise this year. 13, I have Chicago. They're going to be really bad as well. But I think there's going to at least be something kind of fun about this Bulls team this year. They have Chris Dunn, who actually he looked pretty decent at the end of last year, and he's kind of fun. He plays hard on defense. He's fast and athletic, obviously. The team they have kind of a vibe and energy about them. And people are talking about them, though, like, oh, this team could be one of the best offensive teams in the league. Look at, the run and gun style that they could play. But I don't really see it. Just because you play fast doesn't mean you're a good offensive team. And just because you're going to forego defense for speed does not mean you're going to be a good offensive team, really at all, to be honest. But yeah, they have some good pieces, and the backcourt of Levine and Chris Dunn, that should actually be pretty fun. They can get out, run the ball, push it. This team should at least be fun to watch, unlike last year. You should actually be able to turn on a Chicago Bulls game and be like, you know what? Yeah, I'll watch this if they're playing a good team. 12, I have Cleveland. They lost LeBron, so of course, a tough fall from grace, going to the finals to probably not being in the playoffs. But again, they should be kind of fun. Like, there's something to the idea of a team that had so much pressure the last 4 years, and it always kind of felt like LeBron. Obviously he's LeBron, and he rallies the team, but there was always kind of a vibe with Cleveland where, like, LeBron always felt like he was above the organization and the other players, and they all kind of had to deal with him, and him kind of, not even always being accountable for himself, really. Didn't really play much defense, especially for stretches in the regular season where he was just an embarrassment last year. But it should be kind of fun, I think, for them to just go out there and just play basketball. We might see some form of the return of the old Kevin Love where the offense ran through him. And, remember, he was considered one of the 10 best players in the league 4 years ago, and I don't even think he's 30 years old yet. So, they could be kind of entertaining, and they have some entertaining characters like J.R. Smith. Tristan Thompson, I think, is actually... he's not a character, but he's a pretty fun player. They have, I believe they have Kyle Korver still. He's fun. And we finally get to see, is Tyronn Lue actually an NBA coach, or is that team kind of just run by LeBron? That's a question I don't think a lot of people are talking about, really, but it'll be interesting to see just what level of NBA coach Tyronn Lue actually is. Number 11, I have Charlotte. And I don't really know why I have... there's not really a definitive reason for why I have Charlotte 11. Other than the fact that their team was not good last year. They have such a blah vibe. Their only really difference-making player at this point that gets you excited is Kemba Walker. And he honestly, he might just very well be traded this year. That's a very high possibility. So I kind of factored that in a little bit. But even so, I don't really see Charlotte actually really even being that fun this year, because they weren't that fun last year. And that kind of sucks, actually, because they were a really entertaining team in the 15-16 season. They were a lot of fun. They won 48 games. They honestly... I don't want to say should have won, but they very easily could have won the first round series against Miami that went 7. And who knows? Charlotte could have been in the Eastern Conference Finals that year. It kind of sucks that they're gone. Those are kind of like the nerdy NBA teams that the League Pass junkies really enjoy watching, but the casual fan doesn't really think about too much. And it's kind of sad when those teams go away without ever reaching any sort of pinnacle, because then, you just kind of feel bad for them. And you just kind of feel bad, like, man, they played so well together. They played great defense. They played such a smart, well-coached style, and they never made it out of the first round. It's just one of those things that kind of makes you think, like, that the NBA is not totally a meritocracy, and that it takes luck. It takes luck to break through, no matter how well you play together. 10, I have New York. Just honestly, for the pure fact that their team's actually going to be kind of fun this year and exciting, and the crowd at MSG kind of gets behind good teams. And they're going to get Porzingis back at some point this year. Frank Ntilikina's good. Kevin Knox, I think, is actually he's looking like, I don't know if he's gonna be a difference maker, but he looks like he could be good, and the team just looks kind of fun, like the kind of team that you'd enjoy going to a game to, even though they're not great. And Porzingis really impressed me at the end of last year. He was kind of dynamite, actually. He looked like one of the 12 best players in the league until he kind of started wearing down. But I mean, in November, he looked absolutely unstoppable. And honestly, I don't expect too much different this year. And the crowd loves him. He's just such an easy player to rally behind because he's so good. He's so likable, and he's so freakish and unique that it's kind of hard to not, even when you're with, if you're with your family on Christmas and Porzingis is playing on the next Christmas Day, your family's kind of like, whoa, who's that guy? And this 7'3" dude who's blocking shots at the rim and shooting threes on the other end. That's it's easy. It's an easy player to like. 10, I have Brooklyn, or not 10, 9, just on the cusp of the outside. And the reason I have them a little high maybe for what people would expect is, you know what? They just play the right way. They play this super analytics-based style. They shoot I'm not sure the casual fan realizes, they shoot a ton of threes. They have a good coach, actually, Kenny Atkinson, and they have smart players like Spencer Dinwiddie. You're looking at him and you're like, he kind of, does things on the court. Jared Allen's good. But the way I think that they could make the playoffs potentially, but the thing that they really need is they need D'Angelo Russell to kind of, I don't know if he needs to learn to be a better teammate, and that's kind of what held him down, or if he just needs to learn to be more efficient with his play. But clearly, he wasn't totally all they cracked him up to be, and I like Russell. I'm high on him. Anyone who has that size at the point guard position and can shoot and can kind of still get by people, even if he's not a 10 out of 10 athlete. Someone with that size for his position, you can kind of make up for it, especially if they can shoot. And he just kind of, to me, he just kind of looks like the player who would end up being pretty good, but he hasn't really put it together yet. If he's going to put it together, this kind of, it doesn't have to be the year. You see a lot of guys who late in their careers kind of put it together. Like Kyle Lowry immediately comes to mind when you think of someone like that. But yeah, if it doesn't happen this year, you're going to start wondering if it's ever going to happen. But yeah, just kind of by default, Brooklyn ends up at 9. Yeah, so those are my, what is that? Bad math here. What is that? 7 teams that aren't making the playoffs? Yeah, 7. Those are my bottom 7. Brooklyn, New York, Charlotte, Cleveland, Chicago, Orlando, Atlanta. None of those teams are interesting. If you want to argue that one of those teams can make the playoffs, I wouldn't even try to argue against it. I'd be like, yeah, whatever. These teams are so boring. I don't really have it in me to argue about these teams that are just going to get absolutely smashed in the first round, even if they make the playoffs. The first playoff team I have at the 8th spot in the East is Detroit. And again, even though they are the 8th seed, they're making the playoffs, I don't see them being good. They're not very interesting. I don't even know if they're going to break 500. This might be one of those years where, the 8th seed has 40 wins or something. The team, it doesn't really inspire much confidence, doesn't really inspire much fun. Andre Drummond, though, he did reinvent his game. He is much improved at the free throw line, which was always his biggest weakness, where everyone made fun of Andre Drummond's free throw shooting. He wasn't even shooting 40% from the free throw line. And everyone always told him, if you just shoot 60%, they wouldn't hack a Shaq you. And he shot 60% last year. He really did make huge strides from the line. He's obviously one of the best rebounders in the league. Everyone kind of knows that who follows the NBA. And he just kind of looks like he's made himself into a pretty good player. And they have Blake Griffin, who's not really a difference maker. He is a difference maker. I don't want to say that, but he's nowhere near, the Blake Griffin of old. But I mean, he'll bring the ball up. He'll make some good passes. He'll dunk. He'll be fun. He'll help the team out, but he's not giving them star power, at least. But he should be good for them. And you could Stan Van, I think, is one of those coaches who'll, play him at the 5 some on bench units, for full. It'll be kind of a perfect rotation, I think, more so next year, where one of them between Andre and Blake are always in, kind of playing the 5. I think that could actually kind of work. The big loss for them though is oh my god, I'm totally blanking. The guy Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris was their best player last year, probably. He's really good, really underrated, and he's not there anymore. And that hurts them. That's a real loss. He was, I think, probably their best player last year. And I overall, I really can't explain why I think they're going to be the 8 seed, because, every good thing I can say about them, you can say something bad about them, and the bad will counteract the good. I just think kind of by default that I'm not really inspired by Brooklyn or Charlotte or New York or Cleveland. So, yeah, Detroit, have fun getting trounced in the first round. 7, I have the Washington Wizards. They're another chemistry disaster. Not disaster. They're not Minnesota, but I mean their players don't really seem to like each other. John Wall, I think, who, by the way, is overrated. Let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. John Wall, I used to really like John Wall. That 14-15 season, he was one of the most fun players in the league. And you can actually go back. Someone wrote an article in Slate.com saying that John Wall was the most fun player in the NBA that season, which is kind of funny. But he was really entertaining that season. And ever since then, he acts like he's like the best point guard in the league. And he gets offended when you say he's not. And he doesn't even play defense anymore. Like, whenever you say John Wall's overrated, they're like, oh, he's one of the best two-way point guards in the league. He's not. He doesn't even play. He's active. He runs around a lot. He goes for steals, which I guess maybe that's why people think he plays defense. But he doesn't follow the scheme at all. He's just not disciplined on that end anymore. He played good defense for one season, that 14-15 season. And that's why he was so entertaining, because, on offense, he's a really fucking brilliant passer. And then on the other end, he was an awesome defender as well. But now it's like, I mean, he's he's a super athlete and he's a great passer still, but without great shooting and without defense and without being a great teammate, he's just not really that entertaining for me anymore. And I've kind of soured on John Wall, despite being really high on him in the past. And you got to wonder if the knee injury that he got in the 15-16 season has hampered him permanently, and that's why he can't go all out on defense, or at least why it's harder for him to kind of dig deep and focus on that end and play with real hard discipline. But enough about Wall. The team, they had some real chemistry issues last year, which is why they had to move Marcin Gortat. And that's actually a loss. Like, Marcin for Dwight Howard, though you're like, oh, they're losing Marcin Gortat, they're getting a big name, Dwight Howard. I mean, what did he finish? Second in MVP in 2011. He's going to make the Hall of Fame. He won Defensive Player of the Year like 3 times in a row. He was a beast. But nowadays, I don't think he's better than Marcin Gortat. In 2018, I think Marcin Gortat's a better player. And I get why they had to move him because the chemistry was so bad. But Dwight is not a great chemistry guy either. It's not exactly like he's going to be best friends with John Wall. I can already see that team not totally getting along. I don't really know if Beal and Wall like each other. Even they're both good, and man, when you catch them when they're on, I remember that because I'm a Celtics fan, right? So I remember the Christmas game last year. I thought we were going to beat the Wizards and it wasn't going to be too much difficulty. And then Beal and Wall it was kind of like, damn, like they kind of tore us apart. Like when they're on, they are really good. It's just they don't totally play well together. And I'm still salty because I fucking lost money on them last year in the playoffs. That was ridiculous. I bet them to beat Toronto game 1 or to come. I believe the over-under was 7, and God, that was so annoying. Anyways, the Wizards, they'll be a little over 500. They'll win like 43 games. I have them at. Every once in a while, you'll see their talent, and they'll tear some team apart because they're not ready for Beal and Wall. But they're not going to really inspire much confidence. John Wall might ask to be traded. That could be, or Beal might ask to be traded. That could be a dumpster fire. That has dumpster fire potential. But I mean, they have the talent. That's the thing about this team. Even though they're so entitled and even though they have awful chemistry, and they think they're better than they are when they haven't done anything yet, they still have the talent to make the playoffs handily. 6, I have Miami. And this is without Jimmy Butler. This is me kind of factoring in that they're not going to get Butler. And even without him, I think they can still win 45 games. I mean, they have some good pieces. It's Dwayne Wade's last season. That's kind of an energizing force, I guess. That doesn't. I mean, it's not like a huge deal, and the X's and O's community doesn't really enjoy when you use those like these weird reasonings like that. Like, oh, they'll play so hard because it's Dwayne Wade's last season, but it'll at least give them something to play for, and they won't quit at least. And they're a hard playing team, even though Dion Waiters doesn't exactly look like he's in great shape. But the team is fun. Goran Dragic is good. I mean, what's his face? Justice Winslow, he might pop this year. Josh Richardson is good. Tyler Johnson's good. They just kind of have an all-around team, I guess. They don't really have a lot of bad players on the team. James Johnson, and I mean, it's practically the same team that they were when what did they do? When they played with like a 60-win pace for half the season 2 years ago. Sorry about that. It's basically the same team. There's not a whole lot different. I mean, they were pretty good last year. Like, I think, that's kind of lost a little bit because they didn't kind of live up to the potential of people thought they were actually going to win like 55 games or something because of the pace they played with in the second half of the year, or they played at. And that obviously didn't happen, but they were actually a pretty good team. They were the 6th seed last year, and I don't see any reason why they're not going to be the 6th seed yet again this year. So yeah, they don't really inspire much interest. But I mean, they're a good, solid team, and there's really no reason for them to move up or down from 6. And the team is definitely a trade candidate as well. Obviously, they're trying to get Butler, and that to me kind of speaks to the fact that they're trying to flip some of their assets and bad contracts because they're totally capped out, basically. they're kind of stuck with their team unless they make trades. So yeah, if somebody comes loose, whether it's Butler or whoever, they're gonna be in the running. Whether or not they can actually win the bidding war is up for debate, but they're gonna be in the running for stars like Butler, and I don't know who else could be available. I don't even want to say it. They're not going to get Anthony Davis. They're never going to win that bidding war. But, people like that. Kawhi, they might be able to, if Kawhi is, I don't think it's going to happen, but if Kawhi is miserable in Toronto, the Miami Heat are the kind of team that might take a swing at him for half a year and kind of try to win him over and sign him the next summer. So I could see them doing something like that. But overall, I think they're probably going to be in the 6 seed range. 5, the Indiana Pacers. There's a lot of kind of hoopla in the nerd community. I call them the nerd community affectionately, but that the Pacers aren't going to be as good as they were last year because of the whole, they took them by surprise, and nobody, especially early on, nobody expected the Pacers to be good whatsoever. People were totally caught unawares by Oladipo, and they're not going to be able to do that. But I think the Pacers are just a legit good team. I mean, the thing that makes me kind of believe in that so much is because of what they did in the playoffs against Cleveland. I thought they were going to win that. I made money on the Pacers in a lot of those games. I thought they were genuinely going to beat Cleveland in the first round. And if Oladipo had only shot better in a lot of those games, I mean, he had some rough shooting games after playing really well early on in the series. But that kind of won me over. They're tough. They just follow the scheme. They make the right passes. Even though you don't think of them as a brilliant passing team, they just kind of make the right plays. They play really hard. I've always they have enough shooting where they can kind of overwhelm you. Like when you look at Oladipo, Collison, Bogdanovich, Turner, Thad Young, like they just kind of have enough shooting where the totality of the picture makes up to a pretty good shooting team. They have a star in Oladipo. I've always kind of liked Darren Collison on offense. Just it seems like wherever he goes, the offense kind of, I don't want to say is bolstered, but he kind of helps your offense. I mean, he's a good shooter. He just, I don't know. I've always I know it's irrational. He's small. He's not good on defense, but I've always kind of liked him offensively. I remember when Sacramento got him the year after they let go of Isaiah Thomas, they brought in Darren Collison, and they actually played well with him at point guard. I mean, he's not bad. I like him. And the totality of having him and Oladipo together, where you kind of have two guys who can create and they can both shoot, I kind of like that. That it's a nice thing to have offensively when you have two guards like that. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think they're going to get markedly better. I mean, I have them, 48 to 50 wins, same range they were last year, but they're I don't see any reason why they would fall. I think that's my thing. I could be wrong because I've done this before with teams. Like, I thought Denver were going to be really good last year. I thought the year after the 60-win season, Atlanta was still going to be really, really good. And there's some evidence that those teams were take-you-by-surprise teams and that, that the league just kind of caught up to them. And I could just be wrong, and I could be bad at spotting those teams. But I think Indiana is legitimately good. I think they're not going to contend for the Eastern Conference championship or anything, and they're probably going to lose in the first round. I would bet, barring injury to their opponent, I bet they're going to lose in round 1. But I mean, who cares? I mean, you care to some extent because you want to get as far as you want to go. You want to win the championship and all that jazz. But I mean, it's not a failure of a season to just say, you know what, we kind of got this good team kind of I don't want to say by accident, but we I don't want to say lucked into it either, but we kind of got this pretty good team out of thin air. There's nothing wrong with trying to ride it out, be a good, solid 48 to 50 win team, and see if we can build it further. I mean, there's not much wrong with that, especially when your two kind of cornerstones are Oladipo and Miles Turner, who are both so young. I don't think either of them are 26 yet. There's nothing wrong with running it back and just being a good team. And speaking of their opponent in round one, I think the 4th seed will be Milwaukee. I'm really high on Milwaukee. I think they're going to go from being the 7th seed and being very disappointing to being like a 53, 54, maybe even 55 win team. I believe in the change from the worst coach in the league in Jason Kidd, and then going to someone even worse after you fire him, and then going to Mike Budenholzer, who, I mean, the problem with the Bucks, I mean, there were a lot of problems with the Bucks coaching last year, but I think the most notable problem is just that they didn't play modern basketball. They double-teamed too much. They left too many corner threes, and just shooters in general. They didn't seem to value what we know to be the analytical points of emphasis on the court, if that makes sense. They didn't seem to realize the value of leaving shooters open. They didn't seem to realize the value of taking threes and playing fast. They didn't really inspire much confidence in the team, much interest. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't watch too much of them after it was clear they were a dumpster fire, or not a dumpster fire, but after it was clear that they were immensely frustrating and they were firing Kidd. After that, it was just like, oh my God, this is awful. And then, of course, from what other smart people who have much more patience than I tell me, is that no, the coaching got even worse. So yeah, I was not very inclined to watch them much. But this year, they should be really fun. I think Budenholzer is, if anything, if you can say anything to define Mike Budenholzer as an NBA coach, it is modern offense. That's what he is. He is one of the coaches who has this pace and space, share the ball, move it kind of mentality. And I mean, that's not totally original. Everyone tries to play pace and space basically in today's NBA. But Bud is one of those guys. He was kind of one of the earlier ones to do it. He does it really well. And it seems like their strategy is, especially with the starters, is, hey man, just put shooting on the floor. Put Giannis and surround him with shooters. And that's the kind of offense Bud thrives in. I think he's going to give him great side-to-side motion. I haven't watched the preseason because, I mean, the preseason sucks. But, from what I've seen shared on Twitter, the team is playing really smart. They're moving the ball. They're shooting. And, if you don't know, because I forgot about this, but they signed Brook Lopez to be kind of their shooter at the 5. So if you're wondering where my 4 shooters comes from, it's Lopez at the 5 being the 4th shooter. And that team just makes sense to me. The fact that you just say we have a superstar, we have 4 shooters around him, we have good defenders. I mean, Giannis is an insane defender, one of the best in the league easily. Brogdon's a big, heady, smart point guard. Chris Middleton, Tony Snell, Eric Bledsoe, even though he's been a disappointment on that end for a long time. Still, the team makes sense. Even they have some roster flaws, like, like they still have John Henson on their team, who just looks to not really be that good in the modern league. Someone who has, no real ability to get out on the pick and roll, and all he does is kind of protect the rim, sort of, and doesn't do anything on offense. That guy's still on their roster. They're not particularly deep, but just that concept alone of superstar plus shooters plus defense, plus who I think is a really good coach, that just seems to work. And they can, I think Bud's also going to be the kind of guy who's going to experiment with Giannis at center, which is what we've been wanting to see the NBA, at least in the NBA nerd community. We've been wanting to see that for 2 years, and the real radical ones have kind of wanted to see that for like 5 years. Giannis at 5, but Bud I think is going to be the guy to try that sometimes. And I'm just going to say this: I don't want to be the team that has to go against Milwaukee when Giannis is at the 5. That does not sound fun. He's going to be able to protect the rim. He's going to be running around like a madman on defense, just snuffing out actions left and right. He's a beast, man. That team is not going to that team's not going to be fun to play against. But they're going to be fun as hell to watch. And I can't wait. That team, I think they're going to be a blast. They're going to be one of the most exciting teams in the league, at least for me. And yeah, I haven't even really talked about Giannis himself yet. Man, he's one of my absolute favorites in the league. I've loved him for a long time. And to see him finally be a superstar and launch himself into superstardom and be one of the most popular players in the league. I think he was the 4th best-selling jersey last year. It's cool to see. You feel vindicated, and man, is he a delight. Everything that I envisioned, where just have this freakishly long athlete running around, blocking shots, switching, the fact that he can kind of be a ball handler and a roll man. And then there are things that I didn't even envision, like the fact that he's like, whenever you watch Giannis, it's always like you watch the defender and you think they have him cut off. Like, oh, he's not going to get to the rim here. They kind of have him, forced away from the basket. And he like Giannis is kind of trapped a little. They did a good job on him. And then he just kind of reaches up, jumps up and dunks from like outside of the paint. And you're like, what the fuck? How did he just dunk from over there? Like, his drive looked completely snuffed out, and he's at the rim dunking all of a sudden. Man, is he fun to watch. He's a freak of nature. But you didn't need me to tell you that. Moving on. Number 3, the Philadelphia 76ers. They're going to be a mid-50s wins team. They're going to be around 55, 56. They're going to be just barely above Milwaukee, I think. And just my reasoning for that is Simmons was practically a rookie last year. Embiid, that was his first full season of basketball. And they both have so much potential. They're going to be better this season, or Simmons and Embiid will. And I think Fultz actually, just there's something about his frame, his insane speed. I mean, when they brought him back, it was one of those things where it's like, holy shit, this guy is fast as fuck. And I don't know. I kind of obviously, I think we all kind of like the collection of young talent, but I like what they have for this year as well, to be a pretty good team. And Simmons, the whole thing about him shooting threes, I mean, yeah, it matters when you're in the playoffs and you're playing against Brad Stevens, who's kind of, I'm biased, but I think he's the best coach in the league right now. Then your lack of shooting really starts to kind of bear itself. But in the regular season, I don't think it's going to be too much of a problem for him. He's going to be fun as hell. The only thing is, it appears they're starting Dario Saric, and they're rolling out with a lineup of Fultz, Simmons, Covington, Saric, and Embiid, which I don't understand why they're doing that, to be honest. I always thought Saric, that kind of player, like the guy who's in between a 4 and a 5, that's the new tweener. The guy who can't play the 4, who can't play the 5, but he's kind of in between. That's the new tweener in today's league. And I just don't really see how he's going to be a starter. He just seems to me the perfect guy to just kind of go on the bench, play the 5, not really have to deal with too much size or anything, and just kind of or anyone trying to steal a lot of his touches, and he can kind of shine on the second unit, I think. And then you're bringing, in order to start him, you're bring Redick off the bench, which I don't think makes sense at all. I think having Redick next to Simmons, and again, it's kind of the Milwaukee thing where you take Simmons and just surround him with Embiid and then guys who can shoot pretty well. And especially Redick, if he's just he's one of the best shooters in the league. So having that can kind of offset Simmons a little bit. But the team does have some interesting things to work out, right? Because how does Fultz play next to Simmons? How do you, especially for the future, how do you divvy up the point guard duties between the two of them? How do you get Embiid going? You don't want to post up Embiid every possession. I mean, that's not smart. You don't want to run the offense through him all the time. Him and Simmons kind of take up similar areas on the floor. It doesn't totally make sense when you have them on the court together yet. And Embiid kind of slows them down. Like when they really came on at the end of last year's regular season, it was without Embiid, and they were playing really fast and utilizing Simmons to his full potential. And then you bring Embiid there, and he's not slow because he's actually super fast and athletic for a center. I mean, we all know that, but he's just the fact that you have that kind of five there who wants to post up and not really run the floor that much. You kind of just slow the whole thing down just by virtue of having that player on the court. And, I mean, you could always split them up. You could stagger them pretty severely and run your bench units basically as the Embiid post up. And then, have your other bench units with Simmons and kind of maximize the minutes they are separate and almost kind of minimize the ones where they're together. So, I mean, you can do that. But the real reason why this team is going to be the 3 seed, I think, is just because they're going to be really fucking good on defense. They could be the best defense in the league, I think, where you have Simmons, who's awesome on that end, Embiid, who I think was he second in defensive player of the year? Covington's great. Fultz is huge. He's so big and so athletic. And Redick's smart, even if he's not a crazy athlete. I would expect them to be a really good defensive team. So just kind of on virtue on that, and the fact that they're going to also be a good offensive team at the least, that's enough to get them the 3 seed. Number 2, I have the Toronto Raptors. Yeah, and I'm really high on Toronto. I actually, when they first traded for Kawhi, I just kind of thought, oh, what the fuck? The Raptors have Kawhi. That was my initial reaction. And then I really started to think about the team, and it was like, wait a minute, this team could be really fucking good. I'm going to go on a limb right now. I think Toronto's going to win 60 games this year. They could even win 62. I mean, DeRozan got better last year. He's gotten better every season he's in the league. He was definitely really good last year, but he's nowhere near Kawhi. Kawhi is, when healthy, Kawhi Leonard is one of the 5 best players in the league. And that's the caveat to this, is Kawhi being 2017 Kawhi again. But if he is that, if we have the Kawhi Leonard of old, this team is really well put together. They finally solved their lack of a superstar problem because they have Kawhi. They have kind of a secondary star in Kyle Lowry. And the team is just so deep. I mean, you have just the most valuable position in the league, or the most valuable type of player, is the versatile wing. And they have so many. They're just teaming with wings. You have Kawhi. You have OG Anunoby, who I really like. I'm so high on Anunoby. The fact that he was one of those rare rookies where he was actually a plus to his team last year. He's only going to get better. Love that dude. Pascal Siakam, the nerds love him. He's he's one of those super interesting players. He's a great athlete. You have, Danny Green, who I forgot was even in the trade. Danny Green is good. I don't understand why he's like people aren't talking about him as much. Danny Green is a legitimately really good player. And of course they have the internet's favorite, Fred VanVleet. Everyone loves him. The only weak spot on this team really is center, where you kind of have to go Valanciunas, Ibaka, one of those two. But if you really want to get radical, if you're playing a team where one of those guys is getting killed, you could play Siakam at center. And I think Leonard's going to close at the 4. Finally, they're going to have this versatile team. And Leonard is finally going to start playing a lot of 4. And it's just kind of the team, again, this is a team that just makes sense in your head. If you just drop me into NBA 2K with this roster, I would immediately understand how to play with them. And just in crunch time, they can go Lowry, Anunoby, Kawhi at the 4, Danny Green, and then whatever you want to do at center. That's good. That's a legitimately good team, and they have flexibility. Let's say Anunoby doesn't have it that night. You can go with Siakam, play Kawhi at 3. Let's say Danny Green, you don't have to play him. You don't have to play any of these guys, really, except Kawhi and Lowry. There's so much versatility. You can just say, yeah, you know what? Danny Green doesn't have it tonight. Fred VanVleet, get in the fucking game, man. They look to be a really versatile team. They have star power finally. Kawhi Leonard, as it stands right now, is the best player in the Eastern Conference. Now that LeBron's gone, the team that has the star power trump card is Toronto, actually, because they have Kawhi. The X factor for all of this, the 2 X factors. 1, Kawhi might not be healthy. 2, Giannis was the 7th best player in the league, I thought, last year, and was still raw and had a lot left to kind of improve on. That was, he was visibly kind of young and not totally experienced. He wasn't one of those fortified, established, heady, veteran superstars. So, of course, the X factor is Giannis could take that spot this season. He could get better, obviously, and that would not surprise anyone. But as it stands right now, Kawhi is the best player in the Eastern Conference. And for anyone, especially me, who's a Celtics fan and have a lot invested in the Celtics getting really far and making the finals, hopefully, Toronto's scary. And it's scary to go against Toronto and say they have the best player and also a deep, versatile team. That's not the kind of team you want to take lightly. But I think that's a decent segue to get into Boston, who you can all guess that was the number 1 seed. I think they're probably the favorite to be the number 1 seed. I think if you ask most people on the street, probably 8 of them would tell you Boston, maybe even 9 would tell you Boston's going to be the number 1 seed in the East. I actually think even higher. Not just the number 1 seed, because remember, I think Toronto's going to win 60 games. I really do. I think Boston could win 65. I think this could be a really, really special team. Because here's my logic. They won, I believe, 56 last year. They didn't have Kyrie Irving at the end of the season. Jaylen Brown's friend passed away, and if you didn't know, if you weren't following the team, he kind of played in a funk for a while. Jason Tatum hit the rookie wall. They didn't have Hayward at all, obviously. With all those factors, I find it hard to look at the team and say that that's not worth an extra 9 wins. The fact that you have Kyrie for the whole season, you have Hayward for the whole season, you have a better Jaylen Brown, and you have a better Jason Tatum. I don't see how that's not 64, 65 wins. Some people, I was talking to someone the other day, he thinks they could win like 68. I think that, or someone said 70. I think that's crazy. That's high. And Hayward doesn't look like himself yet. So that's unattainable. I think 68. That's crazy. But I don't think 65 is out of the question. They honestly, they are one of the teams that have a chance to be in the regular season the number one rated offense and the number one rated defense. They're one of the rare teams that has a shot at it. The only thing that worries me about Boston, they have a lot of players who want minutes, who want shots. That's the only thing. How do you reconcile a more, I don't want to say ball hoggy, but a more ball hoggy, more mid-range heavy, less spot-up shooter, Jason Tatum? How do you handle Jaylen Brown, who probably wants plays run through him? How do you handle Terry Rozier, who's coming off the bench and is kind of a cult hero in Boston, Scary Terry? How do you handle Kyrie and Hayward? Hayward wants to prove that he's back. Kyrie, rightfully so, thinks he's the best player on the team. There's just a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of egos to nurse on that team. And I don't know. The thing is, though, I have faith in Brad, and I have faith in Horford, and I have faith in Kyrie and Hayward and Jaylen Brown, actually, to kind of, and Marcus Smart, to have that culture where nobody cares about the shots. Nobody cares about the accolades or the minutes. And especially now where they haven't made the finals yet and they're out to prove that they can win a championship, I think this seems to me like the kind of team who will play well and play together. And it helps that you have Tatum and Brown so young in their careers. If they were established like stars, it might be harder to kind of deal with that. But because, Jaylen is in his third year, Tatum's in his second year, it's honestly probably not going to be that hard. And that's kind of the recipe, isn't it? You have established all-star level players in Kyrie, Hayward, and Horford, and then you have really good young players who just kind of, these draft picks that just kind of happen to come through early on. And then you have this mix of young and old, and the young players are good enough to where they really help your team and make them scary, but they're also young enough to where they don't want all the shots. That's kind of the goal of team making, I think. And then you have two players that you can rely on once the current veterans kind of age out. That's kind of exactly what you want from an NBA team. So I think Boston will be the number one seed. And I think they'll be better than Toronto. If they were to play each other in a series, I would definitely pick Boston. The Kawhi thing scares me. What Kawhi could do, the fact that he's, he could, I could see him giving Hayward problems. What do you mean can see him? He will. He's Kawhi Leonard. He's probably the best perimeter defender of all time, I think. And I'm scared of Toronto, but I think Boston's better because even though Toronto has the best player, I think Hayward's better than Lowry. Horford, I think, is better than whoever you want to say is Toronto's third best. And then you have Brown and Tatum and Rozier and Smart. Even with all the depth of Toronto, Boston, they just have so much talent from that 3 to 7 area that I have a hard time picking against them to make the finals. I think they are the smart pick in the East to make the finals. I think they're the safe pick, and they're also my pick. That was the Eastern Conference. the 2018-19 NBA season preview. If you liked it, be sure to click like, subscribe, and check out the West, because the West, I think, is, not up top. I may be up top, but definitely in the middle and in the lower part of the playoffs. I think it's actually a lot more interesting than the East. Definitely be on the lookout for that. And I will see you there. Later.